breaking down the deals, data, and disruption shaping global markets. You're listening to The Daily Ledger with Dennis Sert.
Hey folks, it is New Year's Day. Welcome to 2026. You're listening to The Daily Ledger. It is January 1st, 2026. I am your host, Dennis Sert. Great to be here with you today on the first show of 2026. How exciting is that? Now, I'm very excited about that. We got some good stories to talk about today. We're actually going to keep it short and sweet, and I have a pretty good monologue, I think, on specifically the college dropout has become the most coveted startup founder credential story that we're going to talk about, and we're also going to talk about how Meta Reels became a $50 billion business. And then finally, there's this third story that I was debating whether or not to include. We're going to skim over it. It's from TechCrunch, and it's basically a recap of the rant I did yesterday on the European bankers. They always come out with stories that exactly match my rants. It's really funny. It says, investors predict AI is coming for labor in 2026. So we're going to just kind of skim over that. I'm going to do very little commentary, and we're going to read it because I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that's going to be the show. Let's go over some macroeconomic data. The Dow Jones is down 0.63. The NASDAQ is down 0.76%. So before the Dow Jones, I meant 0.63%. S&P 500 is down 0.74%. Bitcoin is up 0.47% to $88,096. And before we get into today's show, make sure to download Byte AI Market Analysis, which is a financial co-pilot that tells you whether you should enter or exit the market at any given time. It does it based off of basically technical indicators, which are math ways to look at entry and exit points. It's what economists use. Some include the MACD curve, the signal curve, the RSI curve, as well as the Bollinger Bands. And it also does it based off of current news sentiment. It tends to refresh every half hour. That's why I use it as a day trading tool. Right now, Microsoft is underbought, for instance. Tells you why. Of course, it's not a financial advisor, neither am I, and past success does not indicate future results. But that being said, I use it every morning alongside Robinhood. So make sure to download Byte AI off the App Store. All right, let's start with our first story. How Meta's Reels became a $50 billion business. Once a TikTok wannabe, Instagram's video feature is now a hit with users and advertisers. Can it make the leap to television? So, two things that are quite interesting about this article. First of all, Reels is definitely getting more and more and more popular, right? And this is something that I think I mentioned on an earlier show. I talked about how Instagram used to be just like some sort of a Facebook for Gen Zers, but now it's like that part of the platform has almost completely withered away, and it's mostly people just sort of scrolling Reels, like me included, to be honest. And they haven't yet surpassed TikTok in terms of the key metric here is minutes a day. It's 27 minutes a day with Instagram Reels, and with TikTok, it's 44 minutes a day. So TikTok has the cake. And I guess YouTube Shorts is just shy of Instagram with 21. So YouTube Shorts 21, Instagram 27, and then TikTok 44. So you can kind of see that. You know, what's interesting just about TikTok, TikTok started out kind of as Musical.ly. It's like music and then .ly. I used to use, I was an early adopter of essentially what TikTok was, what Musical.ly became, because I was using Musical.ly in like 2017. It was basically lip sync thing, and it wasn't me using it, but at the time I was talking to someone who was really into it for some reason, and so kind of got me pulled into it. And I was just kind of like, um, kind of just scrolling, right? Obviously, I wasn't doing any lip syncing. Maybe I should. Maybe that's what I should turn this platform into, the Daily Ledger Show. Dennis lip syncs pop music. But yeah, that's what people were using it for. And then later in like 2017, 2018, I guess TikTok, which was really didn't have any hold in the US. It was just basically in China. And then they acquired Musically, and then they turned Musically, like the physical app, into TikTok, and then they sort of penetrated the US market with that. So interesting history there. And what's kind of interesting, just going back to the article itself, is apparently just in now going back to Reels is essentially going on the TV, right? So I guess they're kind of entering the smart TV market. Apparently, people are already watching Reels kind of together, um, which is kind of interesting. Here, let me get the exact part where it talks about that. The company says it has just, quote, turned a corner and now plans to build on that momentum by launching Instagram for TV. A few weeks ago, Meta announced the first step towards that goal, rolling it out on Amazon Fire TV devices in the US as a test. And here's the kind of the kicker. So I guess whoever they're interviewing, this kid said Instagram knew from research that a lot of people were already watching Reels with their friends by mirroring their devices on a TV. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I usually just go out with my friends, so this isn't something I'm too accustomed to. Um, Sort of sitting around watching Reels on the TV. I could have seen that, like, if I was 12, and I don't mean that condescendingly. I think whoever they interviewed was like 28. I suppose it's different than Lion. Well, whatever. They interviewed a whole bunch of people and quoted their excerpts in like the same couple of paragraphs here, but um, I think if I was 12 or 13, kind of like in an unironic way, I would have probably spent a lot of my time that I spend with my friends just watching Reels. Probably. I mean, that's like I was kind of doing the precursor to that, with like little edited snippets of like just like shows and stuff at the time. Um, yeah, like a name for it. It's like YouTube, and then yeah, there was a dumb name for it, but it was kind of like the precursor to TikTok, but it wasn't really mainstream, right? It was kind of for just like internet sleuths on YouTube, who are really savvy with culture and just liked watching edits and having a nice laugh. But yeah, anyways, but yeah, so that's kind of what was going on there. College dropout has become the most coveted startup founder credential. So I have a little bit to say on this, right? Because as you know, I myself am a founder. I finished college, I finished my BS and my MEng. I put off my MEng because I got into Y Combinator in 2024, in W24. And then later I went back to my MEng, finished that earlier this spring, and now I'm sort of doing startup stuff. But so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Now, I mean, let's just talk turkey for a second, right? My view on this is you have to be smart, and I don't mean like IQ or book smart, although you do have to have that. I'm talking about strategic smart. Okay, you need to have a plan A. You need to have a plan B. You even need to have all the way through to a plan Z. Okay, because if you don't have backups of backup plans, you will be hung out to dry. And that will be what I am now sort of dubbing a catastrophic failure. And I think that if you're a young tech founder, or you're someone in college who's kind of considering maybe dropping out, like I'm not even discouraging it. There are a lot of really successful, like, no name people, and I don't say it like that to be condescending. I'm trying to make a point that not everyone has to be Zuckerberg in order to be a successful startup founder who dropped out of college. Like, you don't have to be Bill Gates. You don't have to be Zuckerberg, right? Because that's what the boomers will tell you. They'll say, oh, you'll never be the next Zuckerberg. You'll never be Bill Gates. There are only two of them. It's like, no, 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 no. You don't know about all the no-name billionaires, right? Um, so my point is, like, you can drop out and be extremely successful. You can, have, you can be a college dropout and also have a company that's, billions of dollars in valuation, right? But that being said, it is a little bit risky to drop out of college in search of that, even though it is kind of an outcome available. In fact, a startup, you do have to know that there is a large probability that you will fail. Like, your startup probably, in just going off of just statistics, your startup idea probably has zero chance of achieving product market fit, which is what makes startups thrive and launch. If you don't have product market fit, in fact, if you're a startup, you should immediately quit and do something else. And that's called pivoting, right? So you kind of pivot. Many successful startups don't never really start out with what they're doing. It's very rare that it's like that. Usually it came from pivoting several times and then they land on something that has real pull from the market, right? So what I'm trying to do is kind of like paint a picture of, like every time you fit, you can be cute and call it failing, but it's not really, it's not failing until you kind of throw in the towel and like kind of give up on life, right? You never, like, as much as I say it to be tongue in cheek, you never really fail. I mean, again, you just kind of pivot and everything, but there are instances of real catastrophic failure, and I want to bring it serious for a second, right? There are instances of real catastrophic failure. What do I mean by that? So in this article, there's this guy, there's this example, there's a student who, so the article kind of talks about how some founders think it's really cool just to have said, I quote, dropped out of college. And it goes so far. In this article, there's this example where a student walked away from his degree in his final semester because he was convinced that having a diploma would actually hurt his chances of being funded. This is an example of when I say you want to avoid catastrophic failure. Because let me tell you what's going to happen. In all likelihood, let me say this. It's extremely hard to be funded. Let's take Y Combinator as an example. You apply and there's like a less than 1% chance of getting in. Many startups who finally do get in often have applied several times. One person on X, many probably, but one that I can remember said that it took them 8 tries to get into Y Combinator. And on the 8th time that they were after the 7th rejected, on the 8th time, they were finally admitted, right? And Y Combinator used to only have 2 batches a year. Now, recently, they have like more, like 4. So the point is, like, getting funded just with that Y Combinator example is very difficult. It's very, very difficult, right? And so for this student in this example, in this article, to have walked away from his diploma in the last couple months because he thought that he may have a slightly higher chance of getting funded, that he is going to catastrophically fail because he will probably not be funded. It's a black box. No one really knows how VCs pick startups into their cohorts, right? In all likelihood, he will not be funded, and then he will have lost his chance of getting his diploma and graduating. And this is worse than not going into college at all because he's racked up all of this debt, right? Like, I myself am still in debt. I'm in over $100,000 of debt. It's really bad. I mean, I took private loans or whatever to be able to do it, right? Um, and it's like college rates right now are like $80,000 a year. That's what MIT was. And imagine paying every semester, whether it's on a loan or whatever, or however, right? Imagine having to bear the brunt of that for 7 semesters, and then on the 7.5 semester, you walk away. Like, talk about all of that sunk cost. It's worse than ever starting college, right? Now, that is what I call a catastrophic failure, right? Because then there's no degree. You're in as much debt as you would have been with a full degree, pretty much. And your startup isn't funded. Like that, again, that is a catastrophic failure. That is an example of not having a plan B to your plan A, and then a plan C to your plan B, and then having a all the way Y and then Z. You have to have it. You have to have that, because nothing ever happens the way that you think it will. Nothing. Things will happen out of your control, and you have to be prepared for that. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk about this concept of um, choosing whether or not to do a startup and what you need to rely on in order to do that. You need to rely on one thing, and that thing is external validation. Okay. Now, external validation can come from one of a few places. We're going to focus on two of them. The first place external validation can come from is the market. If you have a waiting list, if you have real customers, and I want to talk about enterprise, so B2B. I don't want to talk about direct to consumer right now. I want to talk about business to business. If you have real enterprise customers who are willing to pay you, who have signed an agreement, or better yet, have already deposited cash into the bank account for the potential of rendering a service according to a contract, right? Then you have external validation. And in my framework, then it would be a good idea to go ahead and pursue that, because that will actually also improve your chances of getting into a venture capital or being backed by a venture capital, right? Because they also look for that stuff. Okay. So that's the first type of external validation that is kind of a green light for you to perhaps seriously consider dropping out of college. The second external validation that is a green light is being accepted into a VC, like Y Combinator, like A16Z Speedrun, like Pair X. Now, you may say, why? Well, here's the thing. Like, VCs, again, it's kind of a black box, like I said before. No one like truly knows how exactly they get people. But if you have good traction, you have kind of a little bit of, like, you may have a decent shot of getting in. Okay. Like, as in, you have daily active users, a joke, and you have monthly recurring revenue that isn't a joke. Okay. The other thing is, you might not have either of those, but if you have a good team, then you also might have a good shot of getting in as well. So it's, if you're even thinking about dropping out to do a startup, you should probably, if you haven't found external validation from the first thing that I talked about, which is market validation, like, i.e., you have waiting customers on the wait list who have paid you or are going to pay you or have contracted you, or you have like pilots that may convert into paying. If you don't have any of that, but you have a good team, you should still apply, but don't even think about dropping out unless you've actually gotten in. Okay? Hence that is the distinction between this guy and right? You don't drop out of school until, and this is if you don't have market validation. You don't drop out of school without market validation if you haven't gotten into a startup accelerator. Okay. Now, you may say, well, you need to build something before you can get any sort of validation, either from the market or customers or from venture capital. No, this is a very large misconception. You do not have to have anything. In fact, I am encouraging you not to have anything. Don't even do anything. Be as lazy as you can, okay? And I don't actually mean lazy. But what I mean though is you shouldn't be writing any code unless you have any sort of traction. Ideally, actually, market traction, because VCs also look at that market traction as well, right? And it's also not ideal if you've been backed by a VC but you don't have any market traction. The idea is like you get a little bit of momentum after being backed by a VC, you get into a new network, and then you enter founder mode very rigorously with a bunch of people near you, and then the idea is the momentum carries you into possibly having market validation with higher chances, right? But that aside, you don't want to have code unless you have that market validation. And the reason is code is actually a liability. Okay? If the code is not rendering a service, if your app is not rendering a service to customers, it should never have been built and it should be immediately taken down. Because you continue paying server costs. It's not for free to host an app like that, like whether it's a mobile app or a web app or anything like that. It's not for free. There are server costs that can go into the thousands of dollars. And this actually happened to me one time. If you make like, every programmer has had a bug in their code in the history of programming. One time, several years ago, I was like using Google Cloud, and I had an infinite loop. And within 15 minutes, the server costs had ballooned from like the normal baseline of like $20 or whatever at the time to like $3,000. And luckily, I didn't have to pay that. I was able to sort of fight it and be like, hey, I emailed the Google developers on the Google Cloud team. I was like, yo, like there was a bug in the code that caused this. Like I didn't actually like want to rack up $3,000 in 15 minutes. And luckily they were able to, like, you have to like write an essay or something about it, and you have to kind of like atone. But they let me go kind of scot-free. But the point there's a lesson to be learned from that though. It's that code is a liability. I mean, anything can go wrong, and then suddenly, like, you may potentially be bankrupt. Like, it's actually really, really bad to have code. You should be code averse. Okay. So, unless you have any sort of validation, but more primarily, and you should prefer market validation, really. Unless you have that, and your app, what you've done is rendering a real service or real value to some like customers that really aren't even in your network, right? Ideally, you shouldn't have any code written at all. Okay. So so that's kind of what I have to say. And I want to end with this. It's like, again, going back to VCs kind of accepting based off of a team and no code at all, and just an idea, right? Because that happens actually quite frequently, right? And by the way, nobody tells you this, but startups that get in, many of them immediately pivot. And it's almost like you never got in with that idea at all. Like, ideas actually don't matter at all. It's all about the team, really. Like that, the smaller team you have, like if you're a solo founder, the idea matters a little bit more. But I mean, a lot of founders, they get in and then they immediately pivot. Well, what was the point of the vetting process then? Well, the answer is the team. So that's why you need to be thinking like that and not like this guy in this article who said a diploma would actually hurt his chances of being funded. No, 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 no. If you haven't been funded already, then don't think like that. Like, what are you doing? Um, but just going off of the team thing, some nihilists say, oh, well, if you had product market fit already, well, you need a YC or you wouldn't need a venture capital firm. Wrong. No, no. You want to be blessed by the venture capital firm. You never say no to the opportunity given to you by a venture capital firm. You never want to think like, oh, well, if I was successful enough, I wouldn't need them. Like that's kind of like that Charlie Manson quote. Like, I would never join a club that would have me. Like, okay, that's funny and tongue in cheek, but like you can't use that in practice, right? Like if suddenly Y Combinator or A16Z Speedrunner, Parax or whoever was like, oh, we want to fund you. It's not like I would say, oh, well, if I had PMF, then I would deserve to have been like, you don't think like that, right? You don't think like, oh, well, if I had PMF already, I wouldn't need you guys. Like that's not how it works, right? So that's also an idea I wanted to shoot down on air here because yeah, some people do actually think like that. Like, and I just want to end with this. Like, you have to be a bloodhound for opportunity. You have to be. You have to constantly do and follow the path of that can be the most potentially rewarding. And conversely, you have to avoid the paths that can be that have the most potential for catastrophic failure. Okay? You need to make sure you have that sort of external validation, the market validation or the venture capital validation. Okay. Because dropping out of college is it's a really big burden on yourself and your future, but also your parents. Because a lot of parents, pay for or go into debt or do whatever for their student. Um, and it's like, it's doing your parents such a huge disservice if you, again, even spend any of that tuition money and not get the diploma. So if you choose to do that, you better be very, very sure. And the only way you can be sure is with one of these two ways. You don't think that you have a better opportunity not getting the diploma after doing 7.5 semesters of that. No, that's called being a spoiled brat, and you don't have anything. Okay, I'm talking about the case where you do not have anything, but you think you have a better chance of being funded. Okay, playing with fire here. Another thing you're wasting, because that wasn't the case for me. For whatever, like I think it was a principle thing. But also in terms of like monetarily, my parents kind of made it a thing where, well, it's like, sorry, son, you're gonna have to, you know, get a loan, and the loan rates aren't very forgiving, by the way. It's like 8 or 9%. It's pretty bad. Most mortgages, especially in like 2019, were like 3 or 4%, and then the student loan rates were like 7-8%. So it's like, what the hell? But yeah, so you're kind of essentially, if you're in my case, doing yourself a disservice. It's like you rack up all of that debt, over 100,000, and then it's like, okay, well, I never wanted it anyway. Well, no. You stick it through to the end unless you have something better. Okay, if you have Y Combinator knocking down your door for you, then you can consider, okay, well, you know what, maybe I should kind of put this off. Under no other circumstances other than, again, being having a successful market pull, do you drop the diploma. All right. I want to end with this. I'm not going to give too much commentary. I think I let it go quite a bit anyway here. Investors predict AI is coming for labor in 2026. I talked about this a lot yesterday, but now it's getting like really serious. A November MIT study found that an estimated 11.7% of jobs could already be automated using AI. Surveys have shown employers are already eliminating entry-level jobs because of the technology. Companies are also pointing to AI as the reason for layoffs. "2026 will be the year of agents as software expands from making humans more productive to automating work itself, delivering on the human labor displacement value proposition in some areas. Many AI doesn't eliminate jobs, but rather helps their shift workers to deep work or to higher skilled jobs, while AI just automates repetitive busy work." Well, I hate to tell you, but everybody does repetitive busy work. Okay, unless you're like a founder or an inventor or like a researcher or whatever. I mean, I'd argue in some cases even then, but like you are always doing repetitive busy work. This is actually just saying we're just going to take everything. All right, I think we're going to end it there. Hope you guys had a happy new year, and I guess continue to have it later through the day. Make sure to download By AI market analysis off the App Store to make better trades, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.